right, y'all, welcome back. It's time for my dad to thoughts and grades from Tennessee versus Kentucky. Been watching a lot of film. I watched every player on every play multiple times. So, we will go through the stats. We'll show you who did well, who didn't do well. We'll also give you the grades at the very end of this, but I do want to start with my opening thoughts on Tennessee versus Oklahoma. So I've watched a lot of film on them too, and I would just say that this is going to be a tough matchup for us. I just think that the styles make the fights. We always say that this is not this is just not a good matchup for our defense versus their offense. Honestly speaking, they're going to make us play out in space. It's a whole lot of misdirection. Doesn't mean that Tennessee's going to lose. All right, Oklahoma is a good team. They've got some good players everywhere. Our pass rush is really concerning to me. I think our defensive line, period, is pretty worrying to me in this matchup. I think that their defense does some good things. It's a lot of base. So they just played Ole Miss yesterday. Ole Miss runs the same offensive system that we run, but we are really we run it almost totally differently. It is. There are some differences. There's some things that we can do, I think, versus their defense that bring a lot of pressure. We got to be able to pick that up. So, it's going to be tough, but it is a winnable game. Obviously, on tomorrow, we'll be starting up all the breakdowns and all that type of stuff. So, it's going to be the most thorough breakdown that you're going to get anywhere on this matchup, just like it always is on this channel. But y'all, please do make sure to like and subscribe to the channel if you do like this content, and please do share it with other Vol fans. So, I want to go on ahead and get into Tennessee versus Kentucky. This is the box score. Obviously, Tennessee won this game by 22 points. So that's a larger margin of victory than Georgia had, Ole Miss, or Texas. And the only team that had this large of a margin of victory is South Carolina. Kentucky is a totally different team than they were at that point in the season. I don't even think that same guy that was starting a quarterback is starting now. This young guy, it takes the young players some time to get it figured out, but they do get it figured out. He's very talented. I think he was a 4-star, maybe even a 5-star coming out of high. I mean, he's a really good player. So I'm not saying that to try to cover up for the defense. I'm just keeping it real, man. People just think that, well, you look at this logo and you say, oh, that team sucks. We should be able to beat them. But the SEC is just not built like that no more, y'all. There are no super dominant teams just because the talent is spread out pretty much everywhere. All right, so we're going to try to get through this pretty quickly, right? Over here, this is all of the team stats. This is going to be the run stats, and then under that are the passing stats. Okay, so that starts right here, and then down at the very bottom in the left, these are the special team stats. We will scroll through that. So let me come back up, and let's talk about some of the team stats. So total offensive plays, we had 59 that had 73. We had 509 yards that had 470. You can see the average yards per play. You can see the first downs. They had one more than us, but they also had the football a lot more than we did. I think that is the sign of a pretty dominant offense. If, you can win by 22 points and you barely had the freaking football relative to the other team. All right, so y'all can see some of the other stuff, right? Rushing first downs, passing first downs, penalty first downs. Tennessee's on y'all's left and Kentucky's on y'all's right. Let's keep it moving. Third down, they were better there. Okay, 67% to our 63%. We had to be better on defense for sure. Fourth down, we were slightly better there. Still had to be better on defense. So I'll just scroll through and y'all can take a look at whatever you want to take a look at. You can see all the turnovers, the penalties are down here. We had 6, they had 8. So actually a little bit of a cleaner game for us. Really, there's a lot more penalties that should have and could have been thrown on them. They were playing very dirty, very chippy. We had a video that came out earlier today breaking out Tennessee's pass defense where we highlighted some of that for you. But that's just a terrible, they are super dirty, super chippy. Okay, so scrolling on down, these are all of the special teams. So y'all just pause it right at any point, and you can take a look at whatever stats that you want to. I just want to make sure because some people like to look at that stuff. Okay, so moving it all the way back up, let's talk about Tennessee's run defense and run offense. All right, so boom, right here. Tennessee ran the football 32 times. Kentucky ran it 36 times. The net rushing yards, so this is not taking out lost yardage or any of that. Tennessee had 120 and Kentucky had 149. The average net rush yards, we were at 3.8. They were at 4.1. We have to be better, especially on defense. Have to be better, but there are some things too, I think, with the offensive line. With some of the maybe even with the overall scheme and how we're running the football that we have to get fixed as well. Y'all can see the yards before contact, okay? So we had 1.9, they had 1.6. What this typically means is that our offensive line was a little bit better than their offensive line was. But in this game, I don't know if I can say that that's 100% true. We started to figure out some things and bust some big some bigger plays, but for the most part, I think that Tennessee's defensive line has got to be better. You can see the average yards after contact, so they had more there. These are the runs of 10 plus yards. We had 2, they had 4. Okay, keep on moving. You can see the scrambles and so on and so forth. So missed tackles forced from each team. We forced 4. That's just within our rushing game. They forced 3. So we're winning in that category. Now for the passing plays. All right, so there were 27 passing plays for Tennessee, 37 for Kentucky. But we only threw the football 26 times. They threw it 36 times. So there was 1 sack for each of the teams. All right, you can see the gross passing yards. We're winning there. You can see the average yards, so on and so forth. Now, this is big, man. Joey Aguilar at 77% in this game. And if you factor in, it's not just drops, because I know that we only had 1 drop, but it's something else that they factor in here. But we could have been at 81%. And for them, I mean, 72%, which is better than the 77% that they hit on last week versus Texas. But it's still like, that's never good. You never want to give up such a, I mean, we just didn't do the best job with our passing defense, period, point blank. But they could have been at 77% if it wasn't for, I think that they had 1 drop. Yeah, so we both had 1 drop. All right, and then we'll keep on scrolling. Y'all can see all this other stuff. So we were throwing the football down the field a lot more than they were. That's what this means. So our average depth of target was 13.5 yards. Theirs was 6.6. They ran a lot of quick screens, which also is a huge part of the reason that their numbers looked as good as they did. All right, so they started doing a lot more. They did it versus Georgia, where they ran a whole lot of quick screens, but they really ramped it up, I think, versus Texas. And they're sticking to it. It's something that they're comfortable with, going empty, running the screens, and doing all that type of stuff. So they're starting to figure some things out with their quarterback and what works best for their system. Now, let's keep it moving. You can see the explosive passes of 15 plus yards, so 7 for each team. Now, the deep passes of 20 plus, we had 7 targets, okay, and we made 7 catches, which is great. They had 4, they only hit on 2. So we're doing a better job there. We're still not really giving up too many vertical passes, which that is a positive thing. I know that nobody wants to hear anything positive about our defense, but I'm just going to I'm just going to tell the truth. All right, so now this is the missed tackles forced on passing plays. We only forced 1. They forced 8. That is a huge problem. Okay, that is a big problem. We've got to be cleaner with our tackles. So let's move on. I want to start off with the pass pro. All right, we'll take a look at these numbers here. This is their grades from PFF. This is how many snaps they had. This is the sacks that they gave up, hits, hurries. This right here are the pressures, and then we'll scroll it over just a taste so that you can see the pressure rate. So Tennessee gave up a pressure rate of 29%, which is not good at all. All right, but then you can see what the individual players did here. So Lance Hurd, good job, 3.2%. Wendell Moy, 6.5. I think that he doesn't look as good as I was hoping that he would playing at left guard. It's not horrible, but I think that he looked a lot stronger playing at right guard. Jesse Perry playing at right guard, 6.9%. Sam Pendleton, he had the highest pressure rate given up playing at center, 7.1%. So y'all can see that really most of the pressures, so Sat was actually at 0%, which is excellent. But then you look at Bishop, he gave up a pressure rate of 50%. He gave up our only sack. But, he looked better, like outside of the 1 sack that he gave up. He did look a lot better, and so did our other backs, just as far as the pass pro. Now, you can see that Kentucky, they gave up a pressure rate of only 12.5%. So, we were more than double the pressure rate that they gave up, which is very concerning. So now let's take a look at the pass rushing stats. All right, scroll it back up. It's basically all the same columns, sacks here, hits right there, hurries, and we will scroll it over and get to, this is the win percent, this is the pressure rate. So I like to focus mostly on these 2 categories, but we'll just look at the pressure rate. Okay, so pressure rate from our team, from our, from everybody on our team, not just our front, but from the entire defense, was 20.8%. Joshua Josephs was at 8.7. He's tied with Don Bailey. I think that these 2 guys had the highest pressure rates. That ain't good enough. Those are defensive ends. Well, I mean, obviously, Dom, he plays inside some too, but he also plays on the outside. That number needs to be up over double digits at least every single week from our starters. And the fact that it wasn't, as we're going through, you're seeing, that was a gigantic problem. This is Edwin Spillman. I don't count linebackers with this stuff just because their pressure rate is always going to look crazy because they rarely ever blitz. And when they do, they're typically not going to be blocked. You know what I'm saying? They will be able to generate some type of pressure. So y'all can see, with our secondary, Boo Carter, his rate is at 100%. Again, I'm not really focusing on that. But if you're looking at what they did, 35.5% pressure rate. Okay. So it's funny that it's different from the pressure rate given up with our pass protection versus what they did on the defensive line. But that's just how PFF works. All right. But the numbers will be consistent as far as what our defense shows versus their defense, what our offense shows versus their offense. Okay. Let's go ahead and jump in here and talk about the rushing numbers. All right, there's a lot of numbers in here. So you can see all the players right there. All right, obviously Star Thomas had a much better game. Bishop, didn't play as well, but I think he did some good things more towards the end. But you can see how many carries they got. You can see their yards. This is yards after contact. That's their touchdowns. This is first downs. So pretty solid. Well, let's scroll on over and let's take a look at the yards per carry. So for Bishop, 3.4, for Star Thomas, 6.4, and then for Peyton Lewis, 2.3. I think that they ran pretty well. Like a lot of the things that wasn't there, it just wasn't there. Like, it was more of whenever they weren't getting yards, it was more based off of, hey, man, we're not blocking things well. You know what I mean? It was more like that than it was just on the running backs. That's typically how it goes. So right here, you can see the yards before contact. Right? So for Bishop, it's at 1.9. For Star, it's at 3.5. So things correlate from that standpoint. And then for Peyton Lewis, it's at 1.0. All right. So, just wanted to kind of like show y'all that. We'll scroll through and let y'all see what the other teams looks like. So let's go on to the passing numbers for all pass catchers. I'm sorry, for the pass catching numbers. Okay. So this is going to be their snaps. And this is how many times there were, running routes versus press, which just means that defensive back or, whatever, somebody on defense comes up and they're pressing them at the line of scrimmage. This is their targets. This is their catches. This is their yards. This is their yards after catch. So we have 3 wide receivers here, y'all, with over 100 yards. That is excellent. Okay. That is really, really good. I love what they did. I think they played very well. Now let's take a look at the tight ends. So Mouse Kitzelman, didn't have a whole lot of burns as far as pass catching stuff. Ethan Davis came in and immediately looks like the dude that I wanted him to look like. I think that we now have more tight ends that we can trust, running the routes, catching the passes. He had a great game, not just catching passes and running routes, but also, with blocking and so on and so forth. But all of our tight ends did. I think they all played well. And running backs, we had one drop, okay, from everybody, and that was from Bishop. Okay, but very, very clean without having too many drops. So that's a huge step forward. And that's a big part of the reason that our numbers just looked better, as far as Joey Aguilar's stats and all that type of stuff. Now, we'll go through here and we'll talk about the coverage stats real quick. All right, so I always want to highlight and point out that with PFF, the times that they're saying that players were targeted, which is going to be in this column, versus their catches, which is in this column, you could be running quarters coverage and it was a screen and they'll say, hey, you were targeted in coverage, so you gave something up. So it's not to me like the truest way to find out if you're just going to look at the rate at which passes are being hit on. Okay. But then you could look at the yards. That tells me a little bit more. So 42 yards right here for Tyler Redmond, 41 for Ed, who obviously he had a pick six, 63 right here for Edwin Spillman, which isn't, that's definitely not great. And I don't even know on some of those, might have been somebody else that should have been given the credit for being targeted in coverage. All right, Colton Hood, you see he's doing an excellent job there. J-Mac, 97 yards, not good. Jeremiah T-Liner, 28 yards. That's good, especially for linebackers. Boo Carter, 63 yards. So what is this, y'all? Over like 150 yards, okay, maybe even 160 yards given up just between our star players, okay? That's not good enough. Sidney Walton only gives up 20 yards. And outside of that, it was really nothing. But most of the yards was given up from our stars. You know what I mean? They have got to play better. But with all of that being said, let's go on ahead and get to my grades. All right, so these are my grades. And again, I'm doing this stuff from after watching the film. Also, I'm basing the coordinator's grades. That's going to be based off of their game plan, based off of how ready was our team for what the other team was going to be doing to us. And then for the players, it's just about their execution of those game plans. All right, so we're going to start off with the defense because we always start with the offense. But I give Coach Tim Banks, I gave him a solid C. And it's not even so much for his overall game plan. There's some things that he did that we talked about earlier that I didn't love, that I think that we could do differently just based off of the personnel and what we have. But I do think that his game plan was pretty sound. It was pretty solid. It's really going to be more from like the lack of fundamentals at this point in the year, which that's really it is on him because he's the head guy on defense, but that's really from the individual coaches. It's really like their job to coach up all the fundamentals, right? Like that's their whole job. Coach these guys up. Y'all have to get them ready. And I know that there's a thought out there that Coach Banks coaches our safeties. I think technically, yeah, like if you look at things on paper, maybe, but in real life, it's really Coach Nez and Coach ET coaches our corners. All right. So I'm sure that all of the coaches they're going to be kind of like coaching in different spots sometimes, but Coach Banks is really just like a DC. He's not necessarily coaching safeties. I did want to put that out there because I've seen it in a lot of different places. I totally get why, but that's just not what's actually happening. So just as a defensive coordinator, I think that he's got to get through to his players. I think first you got to get through to their coaches, and then you got to be able to, that message needs to trickle down to the players. He's kind of like a general where he's giving the orders. Whoever's like under that, it's their job to get the troops ready. Okay. And I don't think that we're doing a good job. It's not just Coach Banks. Like we have to do better with our fundamentals. That is a fact. So that's pretty much why I gave him the grade that I gave him. Now, looking at the individual players on defense, defensive tackles, they had a really, really bad game as a unit. A couple of guys did a couple of things individually. I think that let me shout out to Ethan Utley, who I think played well, especially as a freshman. He's really getting better. He did some really, really good things. But those guys, you want to talk about getting moved? I mean, we're getting moved like they kept on running like double teams. I've never seen our defensive line ever get moved like that. 5 to 6 yards, totally out of the hole. The pass rush it just wasn't very good. Like the stunt game, we just looked like we were tired. I don't know why, but that was a really bad game. It's concerning to me because like for the past couple of weeks, I don't think that they played particularly well. We need for them to step up. Like we got all of our guys back now. No reason that's taken a step back since they've been back. So that to me, that was the biggest issue with our defense. If up front in the middle, if that ain't right, everything else it's gonna take hits. Boom, 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 boom. So for our defensive ends, I think that they were pretty solid versus the run. I saw them getting moved some, but defensive ends, if they're getting double teamed, they will get moved some. Wasn't horrible. I think that we set some pretty solid edges. There was no pass rush. That's the main reason that their grade isn't higher. Got to be able to generate some freaking like more pressure. I'm not gonna say some pressure because we got some, but it's got to be a lot more consistent. And I'm not sure what's going on with our front, but if there's anything that really, really concerns me that I'm very worried about, it is our front. They've got to take several steps forward because I do feel like we've taken some steps forward in other places on this defense. So with Tennessee's linebackers, I gave them an A-. I don't think that we necessarily missed Boo Carter. Or I'm sorry, I don't think we necessarily missed Arion Carter too much. Obviously, he's a really, really good player whenever he's fully healthy, but he hasn't been. So for the past couple of weeks, I think that he's, I just think that he needs to probably rest again this week unless he does feel fully healthy because it's not going to help us the way that maybe some people think. He needs to rest. He needs to rest so that, we can probably still win this game without him, especially if he's playing at like 50%, which is what it's looked like. Man, let these other guys play because they looked good. They weren't perfect. We missed a couple of run fits. We missed a couple of tackles. But for the most part, we were in our run fits quick. We were downhill, making tackles, playing with really high motor. And actually, for the defensive tackles, that's part of the reason that they're not at an F because they played with such a high motor, especially like on those screens. Maybe that's part of the reason that there wasn't that much pressure. And same thing for the defensive ends. But man, they play with a really, really high motor. I think that in pass coverage, they looked good. They're actually finding people for the most part, not covering grass. When they were blitzing, I thought that we looked good there. We're getting held a whole lot. Everybody was. But I think that they played well. We looked a little bit better out in space. Again, it wasn't perfect, but I think that that's good enough to get us dubs versus pretty much anybody. If we get like a B game from our defensive tackles and defensive ends, Kentucky doesn't score that many points. I don't think that they even come close to that. All right, so with our corners, I gave them a B. I think that they were okay in coverage. We gave up, maybe like a touchdown, something like that. I think that we were pretty good in coverage. It's just versus some of the like runs versus some of the screens, and not too much with our starters. There were some there where not great with the fundamentals and just tackling, but I think that we were pretty like conscious of setting some good edges. But once we get past our starters, y'all, we really don't have any corners. I just don't think that some of the guys that came in as backups, I don't think that corners where they need to be playing at. Find somewhere else because I don't think that they're understanding what they need to be doing. But that's why, like, I had to grade the whole group. I can't just grade one player. I have to grade everybody, good and bad. I'm not just looking at the bad, which I know most people will probably only be focusing on the negative stuff. But looking at the good and the bad, I give our cornerbacks a B. Now for the stars, I gave them a C plus. You're probably wondering, well, why isn't that lower? Maybe it could be lower, but it's just because their coverage wasn't good. But man, versus the run, I think they did some really nice things. They're having to play inside the box like linebackers, and you're having to fight off blocks from these offensive linemen that are twice your size, more than twice your size sometimes. And then you also have to tackle some running backs that are probably 30 or 40 pounds heavier than you. They were doing that very well. Okay, like they were in their run fits. We looked good versus the run with our stars, but really bad in coverage. Now safeties, I think that this is one of the best games that they've had. Hate to single people out, but Andre Turrentine, he did some okay things, but he really, I think out of all the safeties, even Sidney Walton, he might have played the worst. It just didn't look very good doing much of anything. Again, some things he looked pretty solid, but just kind of like hesitant to get downhill and make some tackles, giving them 2, 3, 4 extra yards. All of our other safeties, they're downhill. Again, wasn't perfect. Some of the angles could have been better. Some of the tackling could have been cleaner. But, you got 15 out there with pick sixes, seeing Sidney Walton coming down, making some big time plays on some third and longs. You know what I'm saying? Not fully making the play, but at least kind of like making some stops or, slowing people down. I think that they looked good. The coverage, as we just looked at, that was good. So, that's pretty much how the defense played out for me. Now, for the offense, I think that Coach Halsley or Coach Heupel, whoever's calling the plays, game plan to come in was obviously excellent. Now, the second and third, what was it, the second through maybe like fourth drives, wasn't great. I think that our rhythm kind of got off. We got to do a better job of showing like consistent rhythm. And I just started to think about this as I was watching the film since last night, that maybe some of the reason that we haven't opened up more things across the middle of the field and our route combinations have looked like the same over the course of the year, pretty much. Like we've added a few things here and there, but I haven't seen too much growth from, like last week to this week. Maybe we're hiding some stuff, okay? But I do think we have to take some steps forward, even though we put up some great numbers, good, scored a whole bunch of points and all that, whole bunch of yards. But it doesn't mean that what worked last night is going to work moving forward. That was just more like, hey, we're better athletes than y'all. Y'all just can't stop us. If that works, then that's great. But you have to have a little bit more. I think we need to have a little bit more to our game, and I didn't really see that. So I'm not docking them. I'm not docking Halsley or Heupel for that, because I do think maybe they were hiding some stuff. I do also feel like our running game versus Alabama last week felt like we were taking some steps forward from like a scheme standpoint. This week started off very, very rocky. Would like for us to stick to the run a little bit more. And I think that we did that some. We're slowing the game down or speeding it up, however you want to look at it, keep the defense off the field. So it's just like little things like that I thought were positive, but maybe could have been a little bit better. So solid A there. Obviously, I'm kind of like nitpicking, but I'm telling y'all why it's not a perfect A plus. So for Joey Aguilar, he gets an A minus, and I think that he did some really good things. Obviously, right? Like he ran whenever he needed to. He was, his pocket presence was good. I think that he was mostly accurate, but he also missed on some critical plays. There were people that were wide open, like for touchdowns, for first downs. What he also has to do is don't lock in so much pre-snap. He's got to go through his reads, because now we're asking our quarterbacks to actually read the field. And on one of them, it was like a third down, like a third and maybe 10 or whatever. We're sending people down vertical. We got the drags coming. We're supposed to throw it to the drag on that, so we're clearing things out for the drag. We try to throw it deep, and it's an incomplete pass when we could have got the first down there. So it's little things like that, kind of nitpicking, but at the same time, I think that he can be better, like for real. So excellent game, but there's still some room for growth there for sure. So that's why he is at an A minus. All right, so running backs, okay, same grade. I think that they played well, as well as they could. We gave up a sack, okay. We also gave up a drop, so that's the main reason that they're, with the grade that they have. But I think that given what was there, they ran with some good patience. They tried to run through contact. They set some things up well, so on and so forth. So I think that that was a pretty solid game from them. Wide receivers, A plus. All right, I think that they were pretty much perfect. There was a drop. I'm not going to single anybody's names out, but there was a drop that I saw going back watching the film. But we're not going to count it because PFF didn't count it. But I think that they ran some excellent routes. They were really clean, just catching the ball, going and getting the ball. Blocked very well for the running backs. They blocked well for other wide receivers. So yeah, great game for them. We already talked about those stats. Tight ends, okay, solid A. Not an A plus just because I think that they blocked really well, but that just wasn't perfect. I think that we missed a couple of, like run blocks. We missed a couple of pass blocks, but, wasn't horrible. Very, very good. Obviously, I think that the pass catching took the steps forward that we've been looking for. So that's very, very positive. Now for our guards and our centers, B plus there. So this, like most of the pressures that we gave up came from those guys. People still, I think, like getting used to playing on a different side of the football, right? So going from the left side to the right side or vice versa, whatever. I think that we still have to get some things cleaned up there. But you know what? There were some times when we had some good movement. There were some times when things just looked perfect. I'm gonna tell you, like this offensive line, it can be deadly. Like it can be dangerous. Those guys are physical. They play with a lot of violence. But we do have to tighten up a couple of things because this team coming up on this upcoming Saturday, we're gonna need for those guys to have their best game. They're gonna bring a lot of pressure from a lot of different places. So last, man, offensive tackles, I think that they played well. The pass pro looked really, really good. Run blocking also looked really good. Little bit of pressure being given up here and there, but definitely wasn't terrible. But those guys are freaking dogs. They're freaking studs. So super proud of them. So obviously, man, offense, I think they had a good day. There's still room for us to get better. That's basically what those grades tell you. And then for defense, definitely not playing up to our standard. It's a lot of room for us to get better there. I think everyone knows that. And I'm curious to see, can we make that happen coming up over the course of this week, man, because it all starts, I would say, today. They're probably going to come back, watch the film, and get their grades from their coaches and all of that, and figure out, hey, what can we do better moving forward? But I think that I think that Tennessee is going to be fine. I'm definitely not. I'm not like one of these super Debbie Downers where if Tennessee doesn't win like 100-0, then I'm like, dude, we suck. Because I understand it's hard to win in this league, especially on the road. But that's going to do it, y'all. Please leave your thoughts down in the comments section. And as always, please make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. And we'll be talking to y'all tomorrow. Thanks. Peace. Thanks for watching. And please make sure to like and subscribe to the channel because that keeps us growing inside of the YouTube algorithm. And if you did like this video, here's another one that you might also enjoy. Thank you. We'll see you on the next one. Peace.